Assalamu alaikum and welcome to this evening's edition of Book Bites. It's not often you get to get into the mind and the expertise of a surgeon. In this case, we'll be speaking to local surgeon, gynecologist, Dr. Chantal Stewart, who has written a novel that incorporates a medical mystery and a love story. Chantal Stewart's debut novel is called The Veil of Maya. It's been recently launched around South Africa, and I had the fascinating task of reviewing it this week, reading through it, and diving into a medical mystery is something that I think takes us into this realm of a very visual kind of perspective of solving this big mystery or trying to solve this big mystery. And I enjoyed how the author has navigated this particular sort of plot, developing her characters. A very, you start to think that you're walking around Cape Town and engaging with this material in a very strong way. So, Chantal Stewart, welcome to the show. And I'm so glad we have this chance to chat to you about this fascinating novel that you've written. Welcome to Book Bites. Hi. We had
Thank
a
you very
slight
much.
lag.
And thank you for having me on the show.
So to dive right in, before I get to this interesting title, The Veil of Maya, I want to know about your writing process, because writing a medical mystery yourself, coming from a scientific background, coming from a medical background, what was the motivation and what was the process like for you?
So I wanted to tell a story, and it really relates to the title, which shows that you can look at life from different perspectives, and they are all equally valid. So the story really is about Lena, the main character, who's a doctor, who is asked to go off to investigate an outbreak of madness amongst a group of men in rural Swaziland. And she's from Cape Town, she's trained here, and she finds that her Western medical training doesn't really serve her well in that situation, that the people have a different view of health and wellness and medicine and madness, and that approaching it in the way that she would here doesn't really work. And so I've brought in the perspective of traditional medicine, traditional African medicine, and also some of the views around mental health and madness, which are quite different. So I really wanted to show that there are different ways of looking at life, and in this case, using medicine to do that, or using a medical problem to do that. I think in part I tried to show the way that medical doctors reason through a problem to try and find a diagnosis, and the way that maybe non-medical people look at it. And then on the other end, the other sort of extreme, a completely different way of looking at medicine. So I think those were the kind of issues I tried to deal with in the novel. In terms of my writing process, I mean, I have a full-time day job. I work in a government hospital. So my time for writing is much more limited than I would want it to be. I tend to write in spurts rather than every day. So I write a lot in workshops, in groups with other people, and that is sporadic. I was playing with this idea for quite a while, and I knew that in order to get the novel done, I would have to have some sort of deadlines or targets. And so I did the MA in creative writing through UCT, and I finished the novel during that.
I think it's great when you have, an idea that's brewing in your mind, perhaps through observation, through some experiences, and that you give form to it through a writing program. So I'm glad that you shared some of that, because I think each of the programs, especially the UCT writing programs, give that kind of structure, and it shows in the resolution of the book. When it comes to the content, I mean, just to get into, your protagonist is a geneticist who spends the days in her lab and receives this call to investigate an outbreak of madness amongst a group of men in a small town in rural Swaziland. And there's an aspect of a love story involved, and while solving this medical mystery. Now, as you've said, and obviously if it's come through well in the novel, you are presenting both sides. You're presenting this idea of, where does knowledge, where does the realm of knowledge, is it really held in the realm of Western medical science, or in traditional medicine, which is, a vast majority of the population still strongly subscribes to. And there's a clash of ideas in some ways. There's a certain amount of arrogance in some ways of who knows the better knowledge. And I like how you resolve this in the story, giving us, for speak to us about some of that, this clash of ideas, but at the same time, this amalgamation of ideas in the healing space.
Yeah, so I think I've done that through the medical story, and also in a way I've done it through the astronomy theme. So the other character, Gabriel, who Lena falls in love with, is an astronomer. And initially, when I started toying with the idea for the novel, I wanted to show the difference in perspectives between a scientific perspective and a more, we call it an arts perspective. Um, and it's something that has played out in my life, as you can see, I'm sure, because I see my medical side as quite scientific, and yet I've written a novel which is more literary. So I wanted to show the the sort of dichotomy between those two themes. And initially, because for myself, I keep my medical life quite separate from my writing life. I didn't want to do it through a medical story. And so I thought of another scientific discipline, which is very much grounded in science and reason. And I know a little bit about astronomy, so I used that. And the obvious contrast is astronomy versus astrology. But I thought that I would, rather than using that, which is quite Western as well, I would contrast the science of astronomy with the mythology around the stars and the moon. And there's some very beautiful, and Lena, the doctor, when she goes to Swaziland, is exposed to some of the mythology because there's an eclipse of the moon that happens while she's there. So she's exposed to some of the very beautiful mythology around the stars in the sky. And, some of it is very, there's one myth of a girl who puts her hand into a fire and takes the embers and throws them up into the sky, and that forms the Milky Way. And there are numerous stories that have been based around that. There are artworks which have been based around that. So that's a different side to life. There's the science, but there's also the beauty and the aesthetics of some of the more literary or artistic sides to that. So that's where I started. And then I had to give Lena a backstory. And because she was a doctor, that obviously was how the backstory had to develop. And that backstory actually became the larger part of the novel, the medical mystery. Um, I've tried to bring those together through the character of the tribal chief that she consults when she can't get through to the men using her Western methods. And I thought I tried to create quite an interesting character who embodied both sides because he had been to London. He was related to the king, so they had both been to London to study, and he had studied medicine in London. So he had some background he did the first 3 years. He had some background in medical training, but he decided he didn't like how it was done. And so he came back to his people and had a more holistic perspective of healing, and so he kind of had the knowledge of both sides, and that's what I tried to bring out.
Well, I appreciated that, you interrogate this idea almost like there's an assumption made that a traditional chief might not understand the perspective of a scientist or the perspective of, that he needs to be explained to. And there's almost, the reader almost gets a sense that your protagonist is surprised to find that he has the knowledge, that he is able to engage in a more holistic way. And you have that broader appreciation when you read that. When you read that he's able to have this balanced view, or he has knowledge of both sides, if they are sides, so to speak. So I really appreciated, how you brought that through that character, and and also this idea that a people rely on faith, the strong belief in something is part of the healing process. That comes through as well. I think
Yes.
in this. So maybe you want to speak to us about some of that. This idea that what people believe and what is most has most resonance to them is part of that, perhaps part of the narrative of healing.
Yeah. So I think one of the problems that these men have, other than sort of strange behavior, is that the majority of them have fits, and they're all on treatment, so their fits are controlled. And Lena goes in trying to get to the kind of cause of this problem. And yet the chief says to her, but why? Because they are on treatment. Everything is under control. What is actually the point of finding a cause if there's nothing you're going to do about it? Um, he speaks about people's beliefs. He says what you believe in makes you human. And I think that does apply to all of us, many of us, that we believe in various things, and that is what becomes most important to us, whether it's a traditional religious based faith, or faith in Western medicine, or faith in your particular type of healer. In the end, it is all of that that has to be brought to bear on how you live your life. It's more than just taking a pill that's going to make you better.
And that definitely comes through. I think that's what makes the story resonant for so many people in different ideologies.
I also try to put the, I think a lot of people in Western people have the thought that Western medicine is like the gold standard, and the others are inferior or secondary. I tried to put the two in parallel and to show that they were equal but different. So not one was better than the other, but they were equal views of the same thing, and they both deserved respect.
And there have been debates, ongoing debates in society dealing with various sort of epidemics on how to deal with whether, medication must be made available to populations, or whether it's just easier and more accessible to rely on traditional medicine. And there might be contention from both sides on, which is the right way to go. So I'm actually sort of going to maybe pick your brain a bit on the more scientific debates around which is the way to go. Perhaps you want to comment on that, just a little beyond the scope of the story of the novel.
You're wanting me to speak about COVID. um,
Well, I mean, we've had
I
this
think what
idea
came
of
out,
which treatment works.
I think what came out in the novel, what I tried to bring out is, and I think the chief is the person who embodies the more balanced view, is that there's room for both. And just because you have a strong faith based belief, for example, doesn't mean that medicine is not good. So, in fact, what he says, he doesn't say the people must just believe what they believe. He says they're taking medication, the medication is helping their fits. But that doesn't mean that they can also not have their own views about how the illness impacts on their life. So basically, he's saying you need both sides. So I think if you're asking me about COVID, I think there is a lot of evidence that the some of the scientific treatments, like vaccines, do work. Um, and once again, it is down to um, the individual, but also the individual's view of how what they do may impact on society. So I think if you don't want to take a vaccine, that's fine. You need to understand what that means for you, that you may have a higher risk. But there is
Right.
also how that evolves in society, because then you might become a risk for other people in society. So I think as long as people understand
Sure.
what it is that they are doing or believing and how it impacts on themselves and others, they must make their own choices.
Sure. And I think this also adds to the debate of whether you're treating symptoms or you're actually finding a way to resolve an actual problem, to find a cure and a
Correct.
broader cure. So COVID did teach us a lot about our both individual and communal responsibilities. In terms of the story, when we come back to the title, I found it interesting because I waited to hear what the title was about. I don't want to give away the story, but coming up with this veil of Maya, and this idea of how we philosophize different perspectives. I mean, you can decide how much you want to tell us about the title and how you came about it.
Yeah, the Veil of Mine, I don't think it gives away too much. Um, Interestingly, I believe when you Google it, the first thing that comes up is a rock band called the Veil of Maya. So that's not what it's about. The title comes from some of the Eastern religions, mainly from Hinduism and Buddhism, and Maya means illusion. So the Veil of Maya is the veil of illusion, and in those traditions, the idea is that most people walk around in life with a veil over their eyes. They see things through their own narrow perspective, and they don't see life as it really is. And what they should aim for is to lift the veil of Maya, to see life in all its reality as it really is. And so in the book, it's really each of the characters has, or some of the characters have their own sort of narrowish perspective from which they come to the problem. Um, and the sort of underlying theme is that what you want is to take off that veil and see the whole broader perspective.
And I see how you've done that, how you brought together different characters with their different perspectives, because we often say life is about creating meaning. And then we rely on our individual perspectives, our sort of borrowed ideologies through life to create that meaning, but it's not the ultimate truth. There is no ultimate truth until you can have a sort of holistic view, and your novel gives that perspective because there's this clash of ideas, this kind of arrogance in thinking, well, the medical scientist has better view than the traditional chief, and the chief suddenly, sort of blows her mind that he does know, he does have a broader sense. And I enjoyed how those came together as well. Developing these characters, on the one hand, because you had a perspective and an intention to bring out these themes, but have you, in your own research, encountered characters of the sort? Is there sort of a real basis for some of the characters that you've met through that you've developed through the book?
So the chief, I actually went to. I have relatives in Swaziland, so I've been there quite several times, and I actually went to talk to a village chief with the idea of finding out a bit about the mythology, but he was very Western. He was like the mayor of a small town, and he wasn't interested in talking about mythology. He was just talking about economics and things like that. So I didn't get very much out of him to base a character on. So Kingston was really a character that was invented. Um, so no. Lena, I suppose, in a way, is based on me, not in that I have done any of the things that she does, but maybe in that she thinks the way I do, has the same interests, the same way of thinking. Um, and then Gabriel, I wanted to have a love story between people with different views, which wasn't straightforward. So Gabriel
Okay.
is probably based on four different aspects of four different people that I know. but I wanted to create a character who was not straightforward and who would challenge Lena's beliefs and yet weave a love story around that.
We often think, like when you talk about going to meet the traditional chief and him sort of being uh, well westernized to some degree, that indigenous knowledge systems will be, sort of um, proudly sort of held on to. And so it's surprising when you hear this, and that you've managed to capture Kingston as somebody who understands the Western knowledge, but is quite proud about his traditional knowledge and sort of preserves that in so many ways. So I'm grateful that you have developed that despite not having encountered it. And I'm hoping that there are more of this kind of indigenous curatorship of knowledge around our country, and that we'll see more stories of this sort from your pen as well. Chantal, it was so wonderful to have this opportunity to chat to you. Thank you so much for giving us the time. Where is this book available, and where will you be launching in the next few weeks? I know it's a freshly launched book, and where can readers hope to find you in the next few weeks?
Yeah, thanks, Shafinaaz. I've had two launches already at exclusive books in Cape Town. I'll be doing another one on the 9th of November at Liberty Books in Grabo. They're all Cape Town based at the moment. It is available in exclusive books in Cape Town, in several of the branches. It's also available online through exclusive books. Um, so it can be ordered there. And then it's available on Amazon as an ebook only, not as a print book.
Fantastic. I'm sure that many people will be enjoying the story, picking up copies at each of the bookstores or online, perhaps from Minimal Press directly. And I wish you everything of the best with disseminating the story and many more stories to come from your pen.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having me, and very nice talking to you.
And so there you have it. We spoke to Chantal Stewart about her debut novel, The Veil of Maya. You will enjoy picking up this copy, especially if you enjoy medical mysteries. And that's it from us this weekend on Book Bites. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.